welcome you now to another episode of the Global Latin Factor podcast, where we talk about Latino everything. I am your host, Crispin Valentin. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. You already know you have nothing to lose and so much to gain. This amazing knowledge, amazing individuals, amazing content about our Latino cultura. So you already know to go ahead and subscribe today. And today we are talking about something that a lot of us love, like absolutely adore, love. But most people really don't fully understand what it is. And we are talking about tamales. We had the tamalera. Now we're going to talk about tamales. Not just food, not just tradition, not just something that people bring up around the holidays. No, we are talking about a whole lot more. We're talking about tamales history, as memory, as survival, as a movement, and as one of the most deepest food traditions in the Americas, all the Americas, because tamales are not just some little side note in culture, not at all. They are one of the most and biggest stories that we need to tell. And one more thing, more than that, you got to realize that tamales are not just something that you eat. No, not at all. It's something that people carry, something that people preserve, and something that people pass down through hands, through their kitchens, through migration, through struggle, through colonization, and through time. So today, I want to take the time and take you back to the history of tamales, back before the modern industry, back before borders, back before written records of most people that rely on weren't even in the written records, because the story of tamales starts deeper. So get ready. Really, really deep. So the true origin of tamales goes back to the ancient Mesoamerica, where it originated. Now, let's see something more clearly, because nobody can honestly tell you this is the exact year, this is the exact tamal that the first tamal was ever made, or the day. That's not how history works. When we're dealing with something as old as tamales, we got to do different. But the scholars do agree that tamales are ancient, and that the time they are clearly being here for many years, as other records have established. So already meaningful and already part of people's life. That's important, because tamales did not just show up randomly as a food experiment. They showed up like something people already knew, something that people are dependent on, because it's an easy way to carry food, deliciousness. And when you think about it, what a tamal really is just makes perfect sense in regards to what it is. So you take maize, you grind it down, turn it into a dough, you wrap it, and you fill it up, and you steam it up. Sounds simple, right? Ask your tia that spends hours making tamales. And now you have something portable, filling, that is protected, and it's easy to make in batches. That is brilliant. That is like amazing technology to be able to do that. And that is not just cooking. That is like food knowledge, to be able to innovate that, to be able to create that. And that is that people don't understand. People understanding that what makes crops, families, feed workers, feeds communities, and still holds cultural meaning. That's what tamales are. Now, that's one of the most reasons why tamales lasted as long as they did. They were practical, but they were never only just practical. They were, even the word itself tells a history. Even the word. So the word tamale comes from the Spanish, from the Nahuatl word, actually. Nahuatl word means tamalli. So even in its name, the indigenous roots is still there, whether we want it or not. And it still makes you think about that particular thing, because too often people talk about food like it's just without honoring it and without digging deeper into what it is. But tamales are one of the those foods where indigenous foundation is important to not ignore because it's just honest. And that's where it came from. That's where it originated. Now, one of the most interesting things in the historical research comes from the classical Maya world. Some scholars have argued that maize tamal maybe even may have been even primarily used as maize food of the world. Yes, before tortillas. Before tortillas. Think about that. So a lot of people today would probably assume it was tortilla first. But history is more layered than what you think. In Maya art and in writing and in foodways, tamales appear as something very important before tortillas. Not marginal, not occasional, but important. And that tells us a lot. Tamales were never just a special occasion food like we do these days. No, not at all. They could be everyday food, travel food, ritual food, and communal food. That flexibility is part of their power in regards to why they lasted so long. They fit into the life that is more than one ways, and maybe that is the reason why they still survive and are still strong, stronger than ever, way past all the obstacles, because food that is like that and it's very important and it does not disappear, but food that can live in a daily life and sacred life, and that's just a different thing. Those tend to last, and that's why tamales are still here. Now, we are going to move forward into colonial period. That is where tamales began to appear more clearly in written records, but that doesn't mean that we're not there before. One of the major sources here is the Florentine Codex tied to Bernardino de Sahagún and Nahuatl collaborator in the 16th century. And what matters to us is not just that tamales are mentioned, but that it is that they're showing up already as diversity, as different options. There's different kinds of different variation, different preparations, different uses of tamales. That means that by that time, Europeans are already documenting tamales. This was already a mature tradition in regards to what they were. Now, they're not just they didn't just witness the birth of tamales. They were just arriving late to see something that had been already here alive for a very, very long time before they got here. Tamales were already existing. And that's the powerful thing about that you can sit on it and think about it and it's already here, because too often people act like something like that becomes real once they get to write it down in a colonial archive. No, not at all. People were already living it. Tamales were real before any kind of archaeology, any kind of written contest, any kind of record that was created. It was already tradition where people were at, and it's only catching up in regards to what it has already been. And even after catching up and being late to the party, that changes the way that we talk about tamales, because it's not just the story of a dish that became important later on and continues to flourish to this day. This is a story of the food that was already carrying weight before outsiders even started describing it, not even consuming it, just describing it. Now, another thing that I really love about the tamal story is that it's been singular. Tamales has never been singular. There's one tamal that speaks to everybody. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, because when you think about tamales, there's different ways you can have tamales. Tamales are, something that is family food, and the whole world wrap maize tradition that develop across many regions and cultures and generations. In some places, they wrap it in corn husk. Of course, we know the traditional one. And in other places, they use banana leaves, as we know as well from Honduras and different places, Guatemala. And some are dense, some are soft, some are sweet, some are savory. Some are tied to like feast days. Some are tied to street life. Some belong to the holidays, and some belong to everyday life, like Ida la Tamalera that makes all year round. And that's diversity, not just a weak tradition, but it is diversity. The diversity and tradition of the tamal and why it's important. Now, something that I really want people to hear is that variation is not the problem. Variation is the proof that a food is alive. Then you ever been around a family argument about who makes the better tamales, right? You always have the tia that they make the better tamales. They'll swear by it. You just know that you're participating in a very old tradition, a very old argument as who makes the better tamales, which house. Now, let's talk about something even bigger, recognition, because tamales have a crown in the modern world in regards to they are part of the traditional Mexican cuisine, as you all most of us know, and they were recognized by the UNESCO in 2010 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. We talked about that before. That is major. That means tamales are not just seen as something delicious, as we all know. Tell me what your favorite one too, by the way. Salsa verde, salsa roja. They are recognized as part of a living system of agricultural, ritual, family knowledge, community memory, and cultural identity. Because a lot of us do recognize ourselves with that. That is huge. That is a big deal to be able to have something like that is cultural. And honestly, it makes sense because making tamales is not just something very quick and casual, as we all know. Maybe you have not experienced it, but I would try it. This is a labor of love. It's a whole entire process. This is just the kind of food where the recipe is only part of the story. It's not just everything. The rest of the story is in the hands that make it, in the tias, the mamas, who learned it, who teached it, who know the masa, the feeling of the masa, who can tell when it's the right and when it needs more, and they do it without measuring. That kind of knowledge does not come from nowhere. That comes from repetition, from memory, from familia, from culture. So when the UNESCO recognized the traditional Mexican cuisine and tamales are as part of the story, it feels right because that's what it takes. And I'm telling you, no measurement whatsoever, because a tamal is not just something on a plate. Not at all. It carries a whole world behind it. The Americas and more. Now, history and more in regards to moving. Colonization changed food and the world across the Americas. New animals, new ingredients, new fats, new routes of trade, and new social identities became to morph the tamale changed. And tamales changed with the world as the world was changing. In many places, pork became more of a common thing in tamales. In some traditions, lard became very important when you come and are making tamales. And till this day, still a lot of people use lard. Different feelings that develop and different regions and style grew even with them, with that region. So here's what is very powerful. Even with all those changes, the core of the tamal remains. Masa, wrapped, steamed, and shared. Tell me your favorite tamal, by the way. The basic pretty much survived. The basics is the core of the tamal. And to me, that says something bigger about our cultura in general. Not everything that changes gets lost. Not at all. Some things adapt without giving up the entire and the soul of what it is. Tamales at its core, the soul is still there. Tamales did that. They didn't disappear. They adapted. And that's one of the reasons why it feels so meaningful to be able to talk about the history, because it reflects the bigger thing regarding to the Latino identity. Pressure, changes, migration, reinvention is still something that is very essential to stay alive than ever before. And then later, tamales became part of another story too. National identity. As Mexico moved through the 19th century and questions of nationhood, modernity, and class and cultural identity, food became part of that conversation as well. And guess who was part of it? Yep, tamales were part of the larger, more conversation around the world, because food is never just food. Food gets used to talk about class, to talk about race, to talk about what actually refines and what is common. So to talk about what belongs, to talk about what counts and what is real. And honestly, we still do it to this day, and it still happens these days, nowadays. Every time somebody says that that's not authentic, I mean, we're still in a conversation of thousands of years. Every time somebody acts like only one version counts, I'm like, for real? And every time people get flattered in regards to, the narrow definition, that's just an old argument. It's still alive thousands of years. But tamales have always been bigger than that. History, in time. They were never just a one thing that was frozen in time. Talk about it. They always had room for region, for local style, for different adaptations and more. Now let's move north because that only matters and is part of the story in regards to where it went. So Mexico, tamales were left in a major footprint here in the United States as well, because not only that, but not just recently, tamales were already visible in American food life by the late 19th century, early 20th century, especially in plates shaped by Mexican and Mexican American communities. So we've been here contributing to the things every day, and people still take tamales and use the street vendors sold them in cities, and they knew them. Neighborhoods knew about tamales already, and they were already implementing it. They were part of the real food culture. So the idea of the Latin food only recently becoming visible here in the United States is not true at all whatsoever, because tamales were already here. They were already getting passed on. They were already being sold by vendors, already feeding people, already shaping public food life. Now, one of the most fascinating turns in the world of tamales happens in Mississippi Delta. Mississippi Delta. Why? Because yes, the tamales became a southern thing that is one of the wildest things that ever happened, best food history facts that there was. The Delta hot tamales became part of the local culture and one of the strongest explanation in regards to connect the story of Mexican immigrant workers, while the food was also evolved alongside with the black southern foodways and local traditions. This is such a powerful story. Again, way before it was cool, we already been doing it, because now we're just looking at it and we're seeing the food crossing borders and being influenced of the immigrants. You're looking at the food that was being put down and its roots and its cultural and it's part of the world. And it didn't just exactly did the same. It adapted. It became regional. It became local. And then once again, it became part of the sound and the memory that identities of a place far from the deepest origin, way far, Mesoamerica. That to me is one of the clearest example of the food and what it does. It carries memory without staying alive, and it can travel without becoming an empty vessel, an empty thing. It can change and it can still remain itself. And guess what? Tamales did that and continue to do that, and it's a beautiful thing. Now, zooming back out to the global footprint of tamales, is the biggest, and there's a lot of people that realize, of course, there's deeper roots, and they are, again, all the way traced to Mesoamerica. That includes the region that is now Mexico and parts of Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and then of course, then across Mexico, tamales become one of the most diverse and important foods in tradition and the entire country itself, to the point where it's part of UNESCO now. And across Central America, you can find a strong tamal traditions in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. Now, there are also a related tradition that's very close to the cousin, and it's part of the Caribbean and the South Americas, and then of course in the United States, especially places like Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Illinois, and as I mentioned earlier, the Mississippi Delta. So one of the most surprising and footprint is in the Philippines. Yes, in the Philippines. Now, tamales cross all the way down to the Pacific, and that happened through the long colonial connection between Mexico and the Philippines. So now the tamal story is not just an American thing, a Mesoamerican thing, it's a transoceanic thing. And that is a huge deal. The global line factors I mentioned before, because it shows that tamales are not only just only rooted here, it's bigger than that. They're also global. They move through the trade, the empire, the migration, and the adaptation, and they reach a new place and took local life there as well. They took its own identity where it was at that time. And that's not just a small food story. That's bigger than that. That is a world history inside, something that is wrapped and steamed. And what a love for most people. What a love. And it's even all over the scale in regards to the way that people feel about their tamales. So they still feel close. They still feel like somebody made this with intention. Somebody learned this. Somebody passed it down, and somebody kept this alive. And that is just such a cultural, amazing thing and deep. That is intimacy and part of the magic of making the tamales and sharing with your loved ones. Now, let me give you just 3 fun facts about food that will definitely, you can take it to a party and tell somebody. The word tamales come from the word Nahuatl, tamalli or tamalin. So every time people say they are speaking the word with the indigenous roots, anytime they say tamales. Get it? Got it? Good. Now, second, some scholars argue that in the classic Maya world, tamales may have been one of the most primary food of maize. Again, bigger than tortillas at that time that people don't understand, and it's wild to think that they could have been before. Third, one of the most unexpected places where tamales became a deep-rooted is in the Mississippi Delta here in the United States, where hot tamales became part of the southern food culture all the way from Mexico to the Delta. That's one of the most amazing things, because it reminds you that food can start in one world and still become a meaningful and very amazing thing without losing its amazing deep history roots. And that brings us to the present. Today, tamales are still alive, and in so many places, by the way, home kitchens, street vending, family holidays, community gathering, church sales, food businesses, restaurants, modern reinterpretation of what the origin was. They are old, but they are not frozen in time. They are very much alive, and they are still at the soul of it matters, and they are the same, because tradition is not just exactly the same forever. Tradition sometimes is about continuity and continuing the process of the amazing culture of the food that it is tamales. So tamales are one of the cleanest examples of that history, of that richness that doesn't go away. They survive ancient history, they survive colonization, they survive migration, they survive modernization, and through that and everything else, they still feel like when you try one, you exactly at home with your people the way it should be. And that is very powerful. Absolutely. So when you really ask about what is a tamal, it's more than just a food. It's indigenous knowledge. It's family labor. It's ritual. It's adaptation, migration, memory, and belonging, because there's something about the culture you have and the history you have, and that is an amazing thing to have in regards to the world. Now, that is why you deserve to pay respect than just being treated like a seasonal dish. People only talk about it maybe once a year, but you have to kind of know when you unwrap a tamal, you're not just opening lunch or dinner or recalentado. You're opening history. You're opening something that outlived empires. colonization in general, something that crossed borders all the way to the Philippines, that in oceans as well, and still alive because people make sure that it stayed alive even through all those changes, even through the addition of different things. And that to me is just like beautiful and the real history of the things that we are. So next time you see a tamal, don't just say, oh wow, that's another food. See the hands behind it, the history behind it, see the generation behind it in regards to the probably the same recipe carried over in memory, and see the people behind it, how much they put passion behind it, because tamales did not just make it into your plate by accident. It took many thousands of years to get there. It got there because tradition continued to survive, which is, again, the Global Land Factor. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Global Land Factor. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. You have nothing to lose, so much to gain, and make sure you subscribe. Tell me what is your favorite tamal. Tell me why you love tamales. Tell me if you have them year round or you only have them once a year, or your tia argues with everybody and their mom, but the entire block, that she makes the best tamales and there's nobody that can touch her tamales. I argue that my mom makes the best tamales, but that's just me. And not only that, my mom morphed into a vegan option of tamales, which not a lot of people do, but my mom happened to do that fusion. And again, core at its soul is still tamal, but made variations that I can have some tamales, and that's amazing to me. And remember once again to subscribe to the channel right now. You have nothing to lose, so much to gain, such amazing knowledge, such amazing individuals that we have featured here on the podcast. Over 240 episodes and growing, and it's all thanks to you, the ones that continue to support. Make sure you comment, let us know where you're at, let us know what you're listening to. If you have not subscribed, I know the ratios are always off of a lot of channels, but I would highly appreciate if you subscribe. It takes but a second and it's free. And remember, we are just like you. We are people. We are humans. We are the spice and flavor in this melting pot that is this world. Till next time.